Okay, I'm calling this party to order now. My name is Sharon Farb. I am the Associate University Librarian for Collection Management and Scholarly Communication here at the UCLA Library, and on behalf of Gary Strong and the entire UCLA Library community, I want to welcome everyone here today to the Writers Series. And I'm really excited. This is part of an ongoing series to highlight voices of writers throughout Los Angeles, and in particular Gloria Chacon, who is both a lecturer in Chicano Studies and is a Council on Library and Information Resources postdoctoral fellow here at the UCLA Library, has organized. So it's really been exciting. She has another one. In fact, we're circulating a sign-up sheet so that we can make sure to invite all of you who are in this room, and you can help us invite all your friends to the next one, which is coming up in May, which when I turn this microphone over to Gloria, she can tell you something about. So let me just give a little teeny intro to what's going to happen. Let me first thank the co-sponsors for today's event, and the ones that have happened before and the ones that will happen in the future, and that is the Chicano Studies program here, the Spanish and Portuguese department, and the Chicano Studies class that Gloria teaches, Chicano Studies 188. So thank you all for making this possible. Okay, the UCLA Writers Series presents a panel this afternoon on Exile and Diaspora, Writers in Los Angeles. Today's panel focuses on writers who have in some way been uprooted from their homelands and who now live and write in the greater Los Angeles area. We are striving for a lively conversation around issues of language, home, loss, new beginnings, and the creative process. By inviting them to the library, we hope to bring more awareness to their literary craft, to the larger UCLA community, and to fulfill the library's interest in collecting Los Angeles. The writers will share their ideas and creative fiction with us, are what we like to think of as hidden treasures. As we listen to them and their creative work, you'll realize that they are at the cutting edge of the literary production process in Los Angeles. And I really want to thank all of you for taking your time and coming to visit with us and share your stories today. What Gloria, and just before I turn it to Gloria, let me just tell you a little bit about how we've organized it, and it's really a full program because we have these rich living treasures with us today, and there's one more who's going to arrive, and I'm going to move from the seat to make room for him. But what's going to happen is, initially, Gloria will introduce each and every one of them, and then she has two questions that kind of illuminate some of the ideas in the title of the talk. And so each of them will speak to those questions for probably about 5 minutes each, and we'll do that. We have two questions, okay? Then we're going to move to where they will share their creative work with you, and we'll have each one of them also do that for a bit. And then we'll have Jorge, or at some point, Gloria will tell us when, Jorge from Spanish and Portuguese will also have some remarks. So it's a rich, it's tightly, Gloria and I went over this, and there's a lot we're trying to do in a short time. But it is just the beginning of a series of conversations with folks, and so please stick around. Help yourself to the snacks and the refreshments in the back. It's informal. We want you to be comfortable so you can hang out with us. They'll stay a little bit. They've also, some folks have brought some stuff to share and perhaps to purchase, which I believe is in the room next door, is that right? And so when we conclude, they'll be here to sign and to talk to you about their work that's also on display in some cases there, okay? So let me turn it over to Gloria, who will now introduce the writers and then proceed with the program.
Okay, thank you all for coming. We have a very exciting program, so please sit tight. I would first like to introduce Karina Oliva. She graduated from UC Berkeley, obtained her PhD in ethnic studies with a focus on Central American literature produced in the United States. Former UC President's postdoc in the English department here at UCLA. She is now currently teaching a course on U.S. Central American literature at Scripps College. In 2007, she put together an anthology on U.S. Central American writers by members of the Epicentro group, which is a cultural collective. She has published her first book of poems entitled Transverse, Altar de Tierra, Altar de Sol. And I will now move to Roberto Leni. Roberto Leni Olivares was exiled from his native Chile in 1976. He currently lives in Los Angeles. He has a BA and MA from the New College of California in San Francisco. His fiction is rich in contrasting images from both his former country and his current one, exploring issues of language, interculturalism, violence, oppression, and possibility. In 2001, he was awarded a one-year artist in residence at Headland Center for the Arts. He has read in numerous international literary contexts, among them Mexico, Chile, and Cuba. Our next guest is Carolina Rivera, who is an educator, writer, performer, and also filmmaker. She was born in Antiguo Cuscatlán, El Salvador. While studying at the National University of El Salvador, she was forced to flee the country's civil war to Canada in exile, where she accepted political asylum. In 1989, she moved to Southern California to be near some of her family members. She completed her undergraduate degree in English literature with an emphasis in creative writing in 1999 here at UCLA. One of her first short stories, entitled After, was published in Alecta 24, a student arts journal of the University of Texas at Austin. In 2002, she worked on the completion of her first book of short stories as a fellow in the Penn Center USA Rosenfeld Foundation Emerging Voices program. She's currently finishing a documentary, which we hope to screen at UCLA as well. So Carolina is going to be a full-time guest at UCLA, which is entitled Manuel Argueta Among Poets and Volcanoes. Our other writer, who is currently finding parking and finding the lot, number 5, was transplanted from Guatemala City to the city of Los Angeles in the 1950s. He obtained a journalism degree from Cal State LA, as well as an MA in Latin American literature. He is currently a translator for the Los Angeles City Courts in Los Angeles. He won first prize in Guatemala's national novel Guatemala's national novel contest for Ardillas Enjauladas. Among his other novels, we have El filo de tu locura, la primera en que se aventuró a tratar el tema hispano en Estados Unidos, La Naya, the next one, Por amor a los muchachos, and Cuando jala la querencia. I would also like to include here Jorge Marturano, who is the professor from Spanish and Portuguese department, who will be offering the final remarks. And one of the questions I would like to pose to the writers here is, how do you choose the language to write in as people, as individuals who inhabit two different languages, geographical locations? I'm wondering about your creative process and how does that happen? Does it happen bilingually? In which language? And we're also very much interested in your relationship to the city of Los Angeles. How do you feel as an exile or part of a larger diaspora in the city of Los Angeles? You know, what is that relationship of the writer to the city? And we can start perhaps with Karina. I would like to also advise that you take maybe 5 to 7 minutes, since we also want to hear your work on the second part of the program.
Well, I'm just really happy to be here and really thankful to be here, first of all, especially with this panel of writers here. Thank you for having me here. I received your question this morning, and I've been thinking about it all day. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful question, because I've often thought about it myself. How do I exist with language? How do I exist with multiple languages? Because as you know, most of us who are bilingual know, it's not just a matter of existing between languages or existing one and in one situation and in another situation. It's like they're both embodied in you. And so in that sense, I feel I'm in constant flux and constant transition between languages, among languages. And, when I was younger, I often used to feel as if something was escaping me, like the tip of my tongue, the tip of my fingers. And I understood it as language. I feel as if I am in a constant challenge with the English language, even though I meet people who often think that I'm very well spoken, and so they think I have a really great grasp on the English language. But it's something that I often actually question myself about. And beyond the grammar and beyond the use of the lexicon, it's just a questioning of how do I fit with this language and how does this language fit me. And likewise with the Spanish language. If anything, I feel even more insecure with the Spanish language because of the English language, because it's so prominent in my speaking and in my writing. And so it's not just a matter of me questioning myself and my relationship to Spanish and whether I'm a good writer in Spanish or not, but also I'm questioned. I'm questioned about just my own use of the Spanish language. And so that means that I'm in constant reflection of how do I use these languages, how do I communicate, and so in being in that relationship with Spanish and with English and with academies and with slang and with urban lingo and Galo and Salvadoran Spanish and all these multiple ways of language, and being in relationship to them, I often find that sometimes the best way for me to just speak is just to utter sound. And so often when I write, I like to write in the very lyrical manner, because that's a way of escaping language. That's going into the musicality of language and into the rhythm of language. And that's where I find myself, is in the commonality of the rhythms of language, and just the syllabic tones, and that I could relate to in whatever language. And I'm lucky enough that I'm also part of, besides the Pico Union communities and the cultural communities that I'm part of and academic communities, I'm also part of spiritual communities that put me in relation to other languages and other peoples, like Dene people and Lakota people. And that has been a wonderful immersion where it has taught me to speak even in ways that I don't know what I'm uttering. And so it frees me up, and it has, in a sense, given me that thing that I was reaching for and striving for when I was younger, when I yearned to have some other language. And I think that yearning actually comes from a loss of the indigenous language within me, of knowing that I've known another language, but it's not fully there, and so not fully embodied. And so that has given me something else when I part of these spiritual communities where I sing in Nahuatl, or I sing in Lakota, or I sing Comanche or Dene. It fulfills something inside of me that helps me to branch out beyond the dichotomy of like Spanish and English. Thank you for that question.
How I write, I don't know really. It's a miracle. I think, because I come from a poor family in Chile, and I was my family was exiled in 1976, and so when you're poor, the tradition really is it's oral. It's an oral tradition. That's how I had a really hard time. I still do have a hard time with Spanish, even though I lived there until I was 14 years old, and I did my high school here. So also between the English, I don't know how I speak English either, or how I write it either, you know, because I don't know very much grammar at all. And, you know, so that language stuff has always been a struggle for me in many, many different ways, you know. For once, for example, now I write in English, but I tried writing in Spanish for a long time, and of course, you know, I mean, I wrote, but it wasn't, I don't think it was any good. And then, you know, and then I come from a family where to speak English was to be a trader, basically. Because it was the language of the empire. And so that was also a struggle for me here. But then again, it's always been like that in my life anyways. You know, it's been, I was uprooted, or I was taken out of my community and, you know, made to come here. Actually, when I came to Exile to this country, was the first time I ever, you know, took a plane, right? I mean, a plane ride, and, you know, so it's always been like that, my life. So with language, it's not any different. Then the things that have helped me, you know, it's been, for example, so something happened to me when I was doing my MA in writing and consciousness, where, you know, this professor from Mexico, an author, invited me to participate and, you know, and enter this MA program. And the cohort, it was maybe 13 of us, and, you know, there were, you know, 11 of them were monolingual English, and only 2 of us spoke Spanish. And he said, "Oh, no, you could do it in Spanish if you want." But of course, you know, I tried that, and then I wasn't able to communicate with anybody. But then that's when I discovered, you know, that I could also speak English, and that you know, and what I had been doing throughout my years here, it was also a form of resistance. It was to, you know, in a way, I was denying for a long time that I spoke English, or that I could write it even, you know, even though I did high school here. And so when I was in that cohort, you know, that's when I began to write in English, and that's when all these stories started coming out. And yeah, so many things have helped me, though, throughout, you know, among them to realize, for example, you know, how they say that, you know, sometimes they use the term where I would be bicultural. And so, and really I'm not. I think a term that defines my reality better would be intercultural, because when I go back to Chile, I'm not a Chilean either. And when I'm here, you know, I'm a Latino, and ideologically I identify as Chicano, you see. And so interlingual, I would say. I am too, because then, you know, here it happens that my Spanish is really, a lot of it is Mexican Spanish as well. I got into languages, then I got into understanding languages, and I learned, for example, that, you know, it was Franco, the dictator in Spain, that decided, you know, that Spanish is called Spanish, right? And it was by a decree, you know, and he erased basically, you know, the eight other languages that are spoken in Spain. And the same thing, you know, happened with Italian. It was just a dictator, you know, writing a decree. So then on top of that, I also, you know, I'm able to reconcile this, you know, writing in English, because, for example, Spanish also is like 20% Arabic. And in the case of Chile, is 40% indigenous words. You know, that's a high percentage. Like in the Spanish that we speak in Chile, it has a lot of mostly Mapuche or Mapudungun, the language of the earth, and then Aymara and Quechua as well. So, and it's 40% of it. And, you know, I always mention to people, you know, that I like to know about the difference between the Spanishes that we speak throughout Latin America, and that is that all of them have the indigenous words for, you know, all this that existed that the Spaniards didn't have words for. So, and Arabic is so also is so there in the language. I mean, if we think of it like the word ojalá, which is you know, used every day, it's you know, that Allah would allow it. You know, for a Christian world that supposedly, right, Latin America, you know, we're always praying to Allah that things will be good. when we say ojalá, you know. So I began to understand word language like that, and that's what I use. And so my idea has always been to use my interlinguality to help me out, rather than to problematize it or to torture me, really, even more, right? Why do I speak Spanish? Do I write Spanish? Do I not? So, rather I use it, for example, what I do a lot when I'm writing is I sometimes a saying comes to mind in Spanish, and then I take that and I translate it into English and I put it in a story, So I remember, sayings or things that come up. And so I don't fight with language. On the contrary, I try to find, ways that they will come together and that they'll inspire me to. And they do a lot because, of course, it's you come to there's a crisis point, and so then it's like, and that's where the stories grow out of, for me. Okay? Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Gloria, for inviting me to be part of this panel. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Exile. I didn't even know what exile means when I left El Salvador until you really experience it, and it's in your skin, and it's in your heart, and it's everywhere, in your body, breathing and all that. I come from a big family. We are 13, and brothers and sisters, and I would share actually with both of you a lot of things we have in common. One of the things is Roberto talks about the oral. The oral is very strong in my country and in my family. I grew up with my father telling us, a lot of stories, and my mom, and everywhere, where you were there, in any corner, you hear all these stories. But it's true. I never had any book. There were no books in the house. It's only the books that we have from school, and sometimes we put the books under the bed because we didn't have a place to put it and all that, right? But, it started to make you a very creative person in a way. And so it is, I went into a school in El Salvador. I studied theater, and performing theater is one of the things that gave me life. And I start writing monologues, and performing. And then I went into the political theater, and that's really was great because it gave me a lot of creativity, being on the streets and talking to people in the buses and all that. So theater is a very interesting part because sometimes you don't even have to write it because you kind of improvise, and it's right there. It's very alive. So that was my first contact with art, with theater, and so I never really thought about writing, novels or with short stories, anything of that. So anyway, in 1985, I left El Salvador. I was pushed into exile, and I arrived in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I don't really any of you want to suffer that because it's a very, very ugly experience. When you don't know where you're going, they just put me in a plane, and you just go. And it was my first time also in an airplane, and I didn't know where I was going. So they said that we're going to Canada. And, you remember now working with memory, you remember the passport, stamped your passport, a passport that wasn't even mine because it was an emergency passport that I had to get in order to get out. So I arrived in Winnipeg, and there I'm in an airport. And actually, I think the Chileans, we have something connection there because it was a Chilean woman who came to the airport and picked me up. And yeah, so that's the first memory. And then in Winnipeg, what do you do there? I was so involved in the university in El Salvador and doing theater on the streets. There I am in Winnipeg, Manitoba. What? Yeah, doing what? Anyway, so there's the moment where I think you reinvent yourself, and like many other Latin Americans, I would say that English, especially in the 70s and the 80s, the English was the language of imperialistic mind, and you don't want to learn it, it's right. And the first thing, but I didn't have much options in Winnipeg because there was no Spanish, there is anything. You speak, you have to learn the language in order that you can survive. So they put me in a program for 8 months, from 7 to 3, to learn the language, and for work. It was a language to send me to work. So, but I'm very, very happy that Canada gave me political asylum anyway. So, that was my experience. So my first contacts with Exile in Canada was with some of the exilers there, the Guatemalan, Nicaraguans, Chileans, and I started doing theater there in Spanish, but there were not many people there who went to see us, so there were a few people, especially in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So that was my first experience with working in art and with Exile in Winnipeg. Anyway, so being in Winnipeg was, now that I think about, it gave me a lot of material to work with. But then I took a bus everywhere in Canada to look for a warm place, but I didn't find any. Yeah, so I was from Winnipeg to Saskatchewan, to Montreal, to Toronto, to Vancouver, and somehow I end up here in Los Angeles. And then, so for me, always has been, I don't think, I don't have a problem with the language, and I don't have a problem with who I am in a way. Or it's a displacement mostly of geographical, maybe, because I've been moving so much. I move, even when I came to Los Angeles, I moved also, I went to, because Los Angeles in the 1990s is not what Los Angeles is now. It was a place where, the downtown was different. All those big freeways divide you, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, there was no center. And so I got kind of distressed. And so I went to Martinique to live for a while. And it was very expensive too, and I learned some French. But I came back to Los Angeles, and then I said, well, I have to do something. And so I started writing some stuff and doing theater in Los Angeles, performing in cafes, in schools, universities. Sometimes I think I did in the parks too. So I started connecting with the community, and that's one of the things, what is the diaspora? Speaking about diaspora, what diaspora we're talking about? What, how is the Salvadorian diaspora affecting the homeland? So I started kind of connecting with the Salvadorians here and Central Americans, and also seeing what is happening, what's the connection. And now that I'm speaking about language, I mean, the whole other thing is that even though you are here, and even though I was in Canada, El Salvador was always there in my umbilical cord, living every moment, every second, every minute, everything, the images, everything was El Salvador. It was there, even though I'm in this place that's where I am, So this has been my experience. So anyway, so how I get into UCLA, they say that when there's something that I learned from someone that told me that in order to know your enemy, you should know your enemy. So I say, English is my enemy. So I should learn the language and learn it well. And, what is behind that, the historical. So I sent a short story. I wrote a short story, and I sent it into the English department. Actually, I went to the Spanish department, but, they didn't treat me very well. So I went into the English department, and they were like, hey, welcome. Yeah, here. Like, well, these people are very nice, So I stayed there. I felt comfortable. And anyway, so I sent a short story, and they accepted it. They accept me in the creative writing program, and I say, hey, great, I'll be here. So that's the way I started writing English. And it was very strange. It was very, very weird to be in the English department, too. I mean, it was... I was the only one there. And, you know, when I speak, I mean, I remember when I spoke or something, they were like, the faces were like, me there. I'm like, okay, you know. And so that was the whole, my experience in the English department was a very, very interesting one. At UCLA, yeah. I still have some kind of chills coming here. But, you know, eventually it was a great education. I mean, I took a lot of classes in, like I was talking Caribbean and all kinds. It's a very, very beautiful program. And a lot of variety. But what I remember now is I was writing in English. And I was learning the language of Shakespeare and, you know, and all this medieval literature. And actually, there was no big difference between all these miracle plays that I read from the 1200. I was like, you know, it's like a Semana Santa in El Salvador, you know, all those. Yeah, I was like, it's not a big difference. So anyway, so I started writing in English, and guess what? I reinvented the language. I create metaphors in my own English. So I recreate my own English, Salvadorian English, I would say, because I start writing, and some of the metaphors, they might not be like English, but, you know, in my language, I made it myself. So now when I'm writing, I mean, there are some of the like when you were talking about syllables and grammar and all that, and I think I even reinvented the grammar in English too in my writing, because there are people that, you know, I never heard about this metaphor before, and I'm like, where's my metaphor? You know, I mean, do you understand what it? And they say, yeah, I do. You know, yeah. Well, so it is a metaphor for, you know, Salvadorian English. So that has been my experience, and like I don't have a problem with I don't have any struggle with language and all that. I come back to Cervantes language, and I come back to Shakespeare language, and I recreate both of them if I want to. I mean, no one tells you that you have to follow certain things, right? You're the one you reinvent. I reinvent my word in Exile. So here I am. Thank you.
Don Roberto, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I would like to, well, I've already introduced you, but
Whatever she said, it cannot be proved.
We began by posing two different questions, and so I'm going to reiterate them for you. I know that you publish mainly in Spanish. You have lived in Los Angeles since the 1950s, and I was wondering, how did you choose the language that you write in? And what is your relationship to the city of Los Angeles as part of the Guatemalan diaspora or living in exile?
Good afternoon. I want to start by apologizing for being late. I was lost. And I see how Christopher Columbus felt when he was trying to find his way around here. Yes, as Gloria was saying, I came to Los Angeles in 1952. That makes me in a couple of months, I'll be turning 41 years old for the second time. I'll be 82. I arrived in Los Angeles after working in Guatemala as the translator. Now, how did I learn English if English was I used to hate English with all my passion when I was in high school because of my teacher. We didn't get along. And so I concentrated in French, and I used to speak some French. When I graduated, my father sent me to Toronto, and for 2 years, high schools in Toronto are known as Collegiate Institute. And so I went to Malvern Collegiate Institute. I was living with a Canadian family, and in 90 days I was able to understand and be understood. I used to go to the movies every day, watch the same movie over and over, just to get the ear, accustomed. And when I came back to Guatemala in 1948, I worked at the American Embassy as an interpreter. As a translator, written. At the same time, I was going to the University of San Carlos, taking schools as economics. And in those days, it was a leftist regime in Guatemala, and working for the American Embassy wasn't making any friends for me. And so one day, when I was about 1 year to graduate, I was told by some high officer of the government that I was on the blacklist because I was working for those imperialistic dogs, and I wouldn't be able to find a job in Guatemala. I mean, in Guatemala. So I went to city council. I explained my situation. My father was living here already. We talked at 10 in the morning, and by 3 p.m. I had my residence. This is 1952. You could do it that way then. He stamped my passport, and I came here. And I have never regretted coming here. I left Guatemala, but Guatemala never left me. Like my colleague was saying over there, you just can't forget where you came from. But I came to this country knowing some English, but my brothers were working in restaurants, my two brothers, so I just went along with it. I went to wash dishes with them. And then one day I said, no, wait a minute, I speak English. I should be able to do something better. So I applied for a job at my company, and I was moving parcels and boxes for $1.10 an hour. And then in those days, the LA Times cost 3 cents, and a gallon of gasoline cost 20 cents. And so I was doing it for some time, but then at the same time, I enrolled in Los Angeles City College. And by that time, I was working in a television company, Hoffman. It doesn't exist anymore. And I decided to take engineering courses. So I took 3 years of engineering, mechanical engineering, and I discovered that it wasn't for me. I never thought of writing in those days. The writer in the family was my father. My father had the quality of writing beautiful stories but never putting his name to them. He always used somebody else's name, and that's it. 1941, my father won the Central American Short Story Contest, and the only time I saw him use his name. And then after that, somebody's name. 1949-50, when I was already working at the embassy, he sent a story to a national contest with my name, and he won. And he was not Guatemalan, he was Salvadorian. And so I had to go and pose as a writer. And when I saw 21 years old, and I'm beating all these established figures in Guatemala, I said, oh my God. And what is your main influence, they used to ask me. I said, oh, Rómulo Gallegos. And so, but then after that, I said, no, wait a minute, maybe I should be able to write something, but it's just an idea, When I came to the States, after discovering that I was not cut to be an engineer because it's too arid, too dry, I got a bachelor in journalism. And then, hey, writing is nice, I like it. So I went to work as a translator in a company, Woodland Hills, and one day I discovered that I was forgetting my Spanish. So I went back to college, and I took classes to get a bachelor and a master's in Spanish. Make sure that I won't forget it. Now the question is, when I write, now that I'm into the only solitary pleasure that raises the spirit, which is writing, I don't care if it is English or it is Spanish, because I was so immersed into the English, and then I went into translations and into writing. And sometimes I'll read something, and the next day I don't remember if it was in English or in Spanish that I was reading, because it's completely the same. Proof that I was getting into this is when I began to cuss in English. I fell down, I didn't say I say ouch. And then one day I said SOB in front of my mother. She didn't know those words, but by the time she knew, and she hit me. I said, I know what salababichi means, don't say it again. But anyway, she is the lady, school teacher, who taught me how to read. My father is the one who taught me how to write. I used to type his stories, and then he'd explain to me why I'm saying it like this and not like that and this and that. So not realizing he was doing it, he was teaching me. And then one day in 1965, when I was in journalism, I wrote my first novel in English. And it was the strangest coincidence. This was the story I wrote of a Jew in some Latin American country. People don't like him because he's Jewish. And one day he has his own synagogue, and one day they accuse him of killing a child. And so without any trial, they throw him in jail and they burn his church. My story, I didn't even know about Saul, the American writer who won so many prizes. Yeah. I wrote my story about a Jewish man who was accused of killing a child, and he didn't do it. And exactly the same thing. I said, oh my God, no, he didn't copy me. I copied him, they want to say. So I was going to throw it away, but I just put it away. 20 years later, in Guatemala, they called for this contest of Guatemala, a fiction contest, first one in 40 years. So I picked out this story. I changed it all around, put it into Spanish, and it's not a Jewish anymore. Now it is a Latin man. I sent it, and out of 75, I won, which is this one here. Ardillas enjauladas, squirrels in a cage. That opened the door for me. I went back to Guatemala after a long absence. I was discovered because nobody knew about me. And my principal of a high school is the only one who knew about me, and he didn't have many nice things to say about my person. Because I was nasty with him too. And then the hobby of writing began to get hold of me. Now, sometimes I wonder, should I write this in English or in Spanish? And in the beginning, I discovered that when I wanted to write in English, I was writing humorous things. Humor, being funny, being a wise crack, you know what. And I said, no, I had to write in English, but seriously. So I began to try, and now I'm putting this away I have 6 novels have been published already, but I'm going into the English market now, and I'm writing short stories. And I've been encouraged by my instructor. I have an instructor from Connecticut, and he's telling me that it looks to me that you have written before. This looks very good. We'll try to sell it. And he gave me some hints where to go, which I already knew the hints because I took journalism and 3 courses on creative writing. But anyway, to me it's paradise when I am writing this in English, and then okay, let's go this in Spanish. And if I have the time, I'll switch to Spanish, and this is it. So I guess that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. I think we will maybe have some ending remarks because I'm looking at the time. It's 5 o'clock, and after this, we will want to hear the creative writing, and you will have 10 minutes to read your work. So, Jorge, do you want to?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, Gloria. Really, I shouldn't be here, no? Because in some sense, I am not. I have never experienced exile, no. I am not bilingual, no, and not even bicultural, no. But I write some reflections, no, and I write them in Spanish, no. So I don't know, no, if it is okay with all of you, but here I am, no. Lo primero que pensé cuando Gloria Chacón me invitó muy gentilmente a hacer unos comentarios con respecto al exilio, la diáspora y su proyección literaria fue la de encontrarme fuera de lugar. Debido a que por un lado no estoy familiarizado con la obra de los escritores convocados en esta mesa y por otro lado lo que conozco mejor a propósito de cuestiones de exilio y diáspora son 2 casos bastante particulares. Pero al pensarlo un poco más me dije que el encontrarse fuera de lugar, encontrarse en el lugar de otro, encontrar algo al estar fuera del lugar de uno y cuanta variación de estos términos se nos ocurra, todas estas cuestiones forman parte de un primer acercamiento intuitivo a las cuestiones del exilio y la diáspora. Los 2 casos particulares con los que estoy especialmente familiarizado, Argentina y Cuba, representan ejemplos más bien alejados uno del otro en tantos rasgos que sería muy largo de enumerar. Pero como ocurre históricamente con muchas de la literatura latinoamericana, o lo que hoy leemos como tal, algunos de sus principales escritores y autores escribieron en el exilio o en la dispersión de vidas muy transitadas. Incluso algunos de sus clásicos más relevantes ni siquiera fueron escritos en castellano. Buena parte de sus escritores padecieron el exilio, la dispersión y la distancia en distintos momentos del siglo XX. Pero también supieron construir una obra vigorosa y distintivamente argentino-cubana, en buena medida a pesar de vivir en otros ámbitos lingüísticos. Para cualquier escritor, las desventajas de desarrollar su propia escritura fuera de lugar son difíciles de enumerar
y entre ellas, quizás la principal, sea el peligro de progresivamente alejarse de la lengua familiar y del idioma nacional. Junto al peligro del desarraigo del destierro, acecha siempre el peligro de ser deslenguado, una cuestión que para la generación de exiliados españoles de la Guerra Civil se convirtió en poco menos que una obsesión excluyente. Juan Ramón Jiménez, Pedro Salinas, Luis Cernuda, Jorge Guillén, todos ellos que a su vez gozaron y sufrieron la hospitalidad de las instituciones académicas norteamericanas, comentaron el horror de vivir rodeados en el ámbito de una lengua extranjera. El pobre español perdido, al que se refirió Juan Ramón, sin embargo, nunca es consecuencia del trabajo exclusivo de la distancia geográfica, sino también de la distancia temporal, lo que marca de manera distintiva no solo el idioma, para utilizar la clasificación de Gustavo Pérez Firmat, sino también la lengua, aquella parte del lenguaje a la que se tiene una relación íntima, frente al idioma, ¿no?, que de todas maneras nunca se posee del todo, ¿no?, y al que uno está ligado culturalmente. Esta distancia geográfica, al igual que temporal, es lo que hace, sin embargo, tan particular el dialecto argentino de la escritura de Julio Cortázar, que no es ya el de sus contemporáneos y que porta el encanto de un recuerdo todavía cercano. También es posible identificar este rasgo en la literatura de Juan José Saer, que realizó también la mayor parte de su obra en Francia, en una especie de destierro voluntario que le permitió desarrollar una escritura que, sonando argentina, parecería ligeramente lejana y ajena. Más allá de las circunstancias siempre terribles del exilio y de la diáspora, que ni hace falta decirlo, es el resultado siempre de alguna forma de violencia y barbarie que afecta al cuerpo familiar, entendiendo por esto tanto el entorno humano como el lingüístico, parece haber quizás como resultado del creciente alcance de los medios de comunicación una mayor conciencia de los costosos beneficios que exceden por supuesto las cuestiones prácticas de desarrollar una relación con la escritura que prescinda de la inmediatez cotidiana del idioma nacional. Creo yo que la diferencia entre diáspora y exilio, mientras hay razones válidas para no considerar los conceptos excluyentes, tiende a colapsar en favor del primer término, ya que la diáspora incluiría bajo su órbita la multiplicidad de todos los espacios migratorios, mientras que el exilio concibe la lejanía, el destierro, en términos de exclusión nacional y de oposición política. ¿Alcanzaría entonces a la literatura de los escritores de origen latinoamericano el beneficio de una atopía donde la identificación nacional se desliga de una patria geográfica y de las operaciones de exclusión que han marcado no solo el límite del Estado-Nación, sino también el Estado-Nación como falla, como fracaso? ¿Es este fracaso del Estado-Nación como institución basada en la exclusión de lo que hace una noción, lo que lo hace una noción sobrevaluada? Si este es el caso, se hace evidente el beneficio, si bien costoso, pues siempre implica una pérdida encontrarse fuera del lugar, que conlleva a la diáspora, no solo al estar fuera, sino sobre todo al estar alejado de las instancias que insisten en el funcionamiento de la literatura como vehículo privilegiado de los relatos de identidad nacional. En este sentido, sin mella la importancia de mantener viva la memoria, de darle palabras al horror, de sacar a los propios muertos y a los muertos propios del olvido de la historia, los escritores de la diáspora, deslenguados o no, siendo, para remedar las palabras del cubano Juan Marinello, a través de un idioma que es propio aun siendo extranjero, tienen la posibilidad también de dar cuenta de nuevos alineamientos que no se corresponden ni con las viejas narrativas de exclusión que los legados coloniales inscribieron en los proyectos de emancipación y que siempre tienen la forma de rígidas narrativas identitarias, ni con la producción de valor asociado a la producción del sufrimiento con que se identifica Latinoamérica y que muchas veces le otorga a la literatura latinoamericana su lugar en la mercantilización de la representación del dolor. Muchas gracias.
Well, now I'm getting confused with my languages. Before the writers begin sharing their work with us, I just wanted to open it up for immediate questions because I know that so much has been said and I don't want to lose this momentum. I know that once they read, you will probably have other questions. So Does anybody have any urgent matters? Yes.
Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Mi única pregunta o lo que les quería pedir, ¿qué consejo tienen para una nueva generación como yo, ¿no? Que, por ejemplo, nací en México, me trajeron aquí a los 3 años. En mi opinión ahorita, en contra de mi voluntad, ¿no? Pero por consecuencia X. ¿Qué consejos tienen para una nueva generación que creció aquí y que se siente un poco desilusionada a la vez con las cosas que están pasando aquí y a la vez muy distanciadas de su cultura originaria, en la mía, México, ¿no? Una generación que trata de sobrevivir y destacarse en la cultura norteamericana, pero a la vez anhelando recuperar su lenguaje, su cultura, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué consejos tienen para una persona creativa que quisiera escribir, quisiera hacer películas y más que nada recuperar todo lo perdido?
Well, I can speak from my own experience. Puedo hablar de mi propia experiencia. Yo creo de que no pares. Yo creo de que tienes que expresar lo que sientes y no importa en qué idioma lo haces. Yo creo que eso es lo más importante. Como te digo, en Canadá, cuando yo estoy en Canadá, no había la riqueza que ustedes tienen aquí en Los Ángeles, porque hay una riqueza de culturas, diferentes idiomas que no teníamos en Canadá. Sin embargo, yo en Canadá busqué la manera de hacerlo. Había unos inmigrantes nicaragüenses, guatemaltecos, de todo esto, y yo formé un grupo de teatro allá y lo íbamos a presentar con los canadienses. Yo creo que siempre uno vive lo de su país, porque yo estaba viviendo lo de El Salvador y busqué lo que realmente me podía, a dónde está mi cultura, ¿no? Que era con los latinoamericanos, y empezamos a trabajar juntos. Busca esa manera. Yo creo que la creatividad también no tiene esa frontera, no debe de tener una frontera, se podría decir. Tienes que darle vuelo, ¿no? No hay que pararse.
Sí, yo también pensaría que habría que hacer de todo. Está todo por hacerse, en realidad. Además, aquí somos la mayoría, ¿no? Y está todo por crearse. Y creo que, por ejemplo, ahora recién vamos, bueno, pues no sé si existe algún otro intercambio de poetas, escritores mexicanos del DF precisamente con Los Ángeles, pero nosotros ahora estamos trabajando en eso precisamente para poder, ¿no es cierto?, compartir, porque lo que pasa aquí mucho también es que como este es el imperio, pues muy cerrado, o sea, a la vez muy abierto, pero tiene esa impresión, ¿verdad? Pero en realidad hay muy pocas voces, hay muy poca, ¿no es cierto?, gente que viene de afuera a hablarnos y que uno le habla para allá, ¿no? Y esa es una de mis cosas que me mueve, ¿no? Lo que me mueve a mí, por ejemplo, yo llevo, ¿no es cierto?, un discurso a Chile que es diferente de mi discurso acá. Obvio, ¿no? Porque, no por las diferencias, ¿no? Y entre los discursos, digamos, lo que yo planteo en Chile es, ¿no es cierto?, sobre que aquí también hay gente, no solo imperialistas, por ejemplo, que es tan simple, ¿no? Y entonces empezar a una conversación, ¿no?, sobre todo eso, para que podamos crear realmente lo que queremos hacer, y empezar a conversar entre nosotros, ¿no? Y a través de las fronteras también, ¿no? Eso es muy importante, ¿no?, creo yo. Y sí, está todo por hacerse aquí, al contrario, y hay que nutrirse de todo, eso sí. Ese es uno de los problemas también que veo yo, que, ¿no es cierto?, o sea, aquí también uno tiende hay demasiadas clics, ¿no? Demasiados grupúsculos, segregaciones, ¿no? Y segregaciones, más segregaciones. Entonces la idea también es romper eso y, ¿no es cierto?, por eso mismo hacerse intercultural, interlingüista, aprender todo lo que se pueda y meterse en todo, porque todo te pertenece. Tú estás viviendo acá, pues tienes que crear y tienes que hacer de todo y meterte en todos los lugares. Creo que hay que ganar espacios. Eso.
Well, we'll have one last question. Or do you add,
Nomás algo bien simple. Nomás te quería decir que cuenta tus cuentos. Nada más. Cuenta tus cuentos y vive en el momento, de verdad. Nosotros, la historia, claro, es muy importante y eso ya es parte de los cuentos, la historia. Así que cuéntalos, los que estás viviendo ahora, los que vives de México y los que vives de Los Ángeles, porque viviendo en ese momento, estás haciendo algo nuevo y algo que los demás necesitamos de escucharlos, así que no sientes que tienes que callarte, no, en vez tienes que precisamente tienes que escribirlos, tienes que contarlos, tienes que encontrar a la gente que quiere oírlos.
No se confunda con Hollywood.
No, lo que hay que tomar en cuenta, como dije antes, cuando uno llega a este país, está nadando en dos aguas. Está nadando con la cultura anglosajona y está hablando con la de uno mismo. El centroamericano tiene otro obstáculo, y es que la cultura mexicana es tan fuerte que el centroamericano termina mexicanizándose. Y yo he regresado a Guatemala y descubro que los guatemaltecos ya no hablan como guatemaltecos, la telenovela se ha encargado. Y entonces, sí, allá dicen órale y mano y todo, tal como suena aquí. Entonces, volviendo al punto suyo, procure mantener su individualidad, escriba en español lo más que pueda, tome cursos de escritura creativa, creative writing, ya sea unas en inglés, hay otras que dan en español, y procuren mantenerse en sus dos mundos. Nosotros tenemos una ventaja sobre el que solo habla un idioma, y es que ellos tienen su mundo, nosotros tenemos el de nuestro idioma y el nuevo, vivimos en dos mundos, ellos viven en uno solo. O como dijeron también, el que habla 5 idiomas es políglota, el que habla 3 idiomas es trilingüe, el que habla 2 es bilingüe, y el que solo habla 1 es americano. Pero bueno, este país me ha dado mucho, no debo tirarle piedras. Pero a lo que voy es a que yo en un principio quería cambiar mi acento, que no se notara. Y un profesor me dijo, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué quieres cambiar el acento? Que habla con buena gramática los 2 idiomas, que se te entienda, y eso es todo. De manera que no hay que perder la individualidad. Si yo pienso mis cosas de los cuentos que escribo en español, los pongo en español, no me meto a traducirlos. Pienso otras cosas en inglés y escribo en inglés y vives en dos mundos al mismo tiempo.
Muy bien. Creo que tenemos tiempo para una pregunta más.
La pregunta que tengo, pero antes que nada quiero hacer un comentario como editor. By the way, I'm Karina Oliva's publisher. With the Southern Press. And one of the things that I always ask myself, and hopefully you guys could answer this, how often do you think about the market? Because that's one important thing that we have to ask ourselves. I mean, yes, we can be creative, we can use our imagination, you can go with your feelings of writing in Spanish because of some sort of nostalgia or whatever it is that moves you to write in that language. However, we have to think about the market. Do you?
You're asking me? What? I'll be a liar if I say no. Of course I do, because the writer's market is my favorite book. And if I am going to write some story, I go and say, okay, who will be interested? I just finished selling one story. I'll make it quick. 2 brothers are running away from this crowd that wants to beat them up. They are yelling at them, and they are throwing rocks, and they were not allowed to go to the parking lot and get their car. And they are running out. It's a small town in Guatemala. And then they are hiding there, and they are looking for them all over. They want to hang it. They want to do this and do that. And then when it is night, they are managed to go back to the parking lot. And when they are driving home, he says, brother, promise me you'll never ask me again to be a referee in a soccer game in this town. And I hope I can sell it. I've submitted it. But then I was thinking, who could be interested in my story?
My question was more like how that affects the language, because especially when we're writing in the diaspora, right? We have to think about the Anglo reader, and who's going to be more willing to buy the book. So, does that have an effect on what language you write?
E-books. All the the way that they're beating. I have a bookstore, and I can see my sales going down because people now go to the telenovelas or the e-books, or they don't want to read anymore like this. And so when I'm writing, I'm thinking, who is going to read my story? And I see some uninterested person trying to pick up in a quick way to read what I'm, and it is very discouraging.
By the way, I bought all your books, even though I don't go to the store anymore. I still have every single book.
Oh, you do? You're my number one fan.
Do you want to say anything about marketing?
I have my market are my nieces and nephews. Really, that's whom I write for. You know, I had a very hard life in this country, growing up in this country, because of all the contradictions. You know, Chile, you know, in 1973, the 11th of September, you know, the CIA and the State Department and the government of this country, you know, is the reason why I'm here. And so then that also created, you know, I was angry, you know, growing up here. And so then, you know, I just want to soften the road out for them. You know, there's some nieces and nephews that don't speak Spanish at all, and there are others that speak a little. You know, they feel, you know, and they've entered different, you know, communities. And so my idea is, you know, to kind of contribute to their growing up, you know. So that's my market.
I think we're going to move on to the readings, and because I also want to allow time at the end for anyone who has any questions about your writing in particular. And I would like to ask the women to go first, or maybe, Carolina, can you read first, maybe 4 pages at the max? And then Roberto, then Karina, and then Roberto.
Okay, I will read this short story. It's called Resonance. I drive the narrow uphill street. It edges colorfully, veined with flowers, purple, red, and orange. Brownish green plants grow wild and clinging to the sides of the steep hill. At the top of this country road in the heart of LA, there is a right turn only intersection. Then the tightly winding street climbs, just before quickly leading back down to the larger Echo Park neighborhood. Almost every day I bring the car to a full stop, taking the full panoramic view and look out at the city of Glendale, the hills, and the San Gabriel Mountains. At the bottom of my hill, there are the train rails that from so far up suggest solitude. Or is it solitude that embraces me here in this spot? Straight ahead in the air, the skeleton of a tree juts out from my hill. It sometimes has life, though at the top of its weak branches I look every day for my friend, an arrogant hawk. The tree belongs to him. From his perch, the hawk draws my attention away from the city. Better yet, he grabs me out of my absent-mindedness, forcing me to focus on his part of this canvas that it is a portion of my exile. When he is present, I park the car to wait with him. The hawk is almost the color of the tree, though in more vividly varying shades of browns and beige, especially beautiful when flashes of wind reveal patterns of white. The hawk looks down at the city actively, attentively, with agility. I feel we are related. We are looking and hoping to catch something, staring beyond where we physically stand. Today makes a week since our last encounter, again at 10 in the morning. I look at him, looking in the direction of Glendale. I don't think he's really looking at the city. His victims are in closer view. I try to stay with him until he flies away toward the park, or until he launches into deliberate swoosh to catch some prey. The hawk and the steep hills bring me back to days seated on the terrace of my parents' home. Straight out and above, the pregnant, inflated moon catches memories. The moon, I keep company with my father who sits on the far side of the terrace. I live now on the last street up or the first street down the hill. I don't know how I end up here in this high place, so unlike where I am from. There are many ways to get here. From Sunset up the main street or up steeper side streets. Here in the middle of the road on the way back to my Los Angeles home, memories of childhood spring forth from the half of my life from another world. The hawk's flight takes him from tree to park to high electrical wires far above Sunset Boulevard. Tomorrow he will come back to his tree, whether I meet him or not. His search for queries seems similar to my own. The fulminate rays of the sun direct me as actor to remember lines from my past, to recall scenarios of memory. A collage of thoughts springs from days long ago in El Salvador, to family, to mom, and to dad, seated on the terrace of an unfinished mansion. She worries about, he meditates upon their children's safety in this scourge of civil war. While Hawk hunts for food, I hurt for the empty pages I need to fill today. Into a huge blue sky, fat white clouds line up across the panorama of mountains and drift eastward. Suddenly, a flock of black crows flies below the purview of clouds. My friend, the hawk, accompanies them in their flight. I arrive home. I park. The phone rings as I open the door to the living room. I run through its clutter of mail, of paper, of boxes full of books, clothes. It is Dad. He announces that he and Mom got a visa to come to the United States. They are coming to visit us. It is their first trip on a plane. He says, "Vamos a viajar, hija. Hoy sí, nos vamos." The conversation ends as always with his characteristics intonation of expectation of more adventure. His younger voice from the past stirs up memory, just as his older voice fades from the small space that it is my living room. In a box on the floor are fat black books full of scribbles from when I first came to Los Angeles. I read of those early journeys on endlessly long freeways with numbers like 10 or 210 east or west. They recollect in perfect detail what should be distant memories. I crave to rewrite them, to capture an era full of conflict, doubt, and masses of refugees in exile like me. It is an exile that never seems to end. I ask myself here, situated within my own house, among the sound of helicopters, birds, and an acquired language, who am I?
So one story?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll see if we have time later. We can do it.
Okay. Okay. So this is called Word Sound of Power. He was a regular at the bookstore where I worked. These were the days I only understood half of what it all meant, as the word regular in the country of the North has many layers of meaning. For the time being, I opted not to include it in the vocabulary I was beginning to learn. Printer's Ink was one of the first bookstores in the state to include a cafe amongst the spines of every imaginable book, 5,000 magazines and newspapers from around the world. Philip used to sit and drink free coffee offered to him by the punk youth who tended the counter. He had the longest dreads one might imagine a white youth could grow. There was a wooden bench on the sidewalk right in front of the store, which signaled a bus stop. At my break's end, I would always have a smoke there. Philip often sat there as well, and as usual was not waiting for the bus, but enjoying the sun and watching the little world one finds in the streets of a rich suburb. Slowly, a police car rolled towards us. Philip sang out a key in the soft and rough voice of his, "Police and thieves in the streets, tearing the nation with their guns and ammunitions." He then shined his crooked yellow teeth at me and moved his elbow, offering me some of his smoke. As the cops passed in front of us, he continued his lyrics, "I wouldn't like to be a flea on your collar, man." He went on saying, "That music is music for the navigation of the mind. I am a selector at this community-owned radio station, KKUP People's Radio. Would you like to come to my show tonight? It's late into dawn, though." The show started at midnight and ended at 6 a.m. with the first light of the next day. I borrowed my father's beat-up Opel, and we drove together, as we later did on many future occasions. As always, there was more music than talk. The next day, I came in late for my Tuesday night shift. Philip got there a few hours before closing time, riding high on his roller skates. Coming in wheels never failed to make the shift manager approach Philip, demanding he take the skates off if he wanted to stay inside the store. Incidents like this always got him a free double mocha with plenty of whipped cream on top from Rosalva, the employee working the cafe. He would look into Dawn of Rose's eyes as he received the gift from her, and with his best inquisitive of smile thanked her with, "Watch out, troubles with a bomb. Dumping surplus food and deceive, and they cause allow starvation to be. Aid for countries in despair, aid for countries that have no share. They buy your land to dump nuclear waste, so you sell it so that food your children can taste. They love your country, they want to invest, but your country don't get when it comes to the test. Them gone home with all your profits your government spent to blow on a rocket. They strike and rob you of your own, then send it back in a foreign loan. They come, they work, they smile, so please they leave. You discover a new disease. Troubles with a bomb. Look out." I greeted Philip just as he was also offered a scone. He responded, "Toasted." "And did you wanted it with butter and jam?" Right on cue, he looked at me and sang, "I got the vibes and signs of times today, the vibes and signs of times." After the night's work, Philip and I sat on the bench again. We were lucky for the spot since, contrary to what most people think, cities in the U.S. often have only a minuscule of public space to rest, unless one is buying something. Even if it is a bad cup of coffee or an old donut refried in overused cheap cooking oil. There were a few homeless in town, and Philip knew them all. They were mostly youth that were passing by, except for a few, such as primitive men. He walked the streets of the so-called downtown areas, at times wrapped in sheepskins and always very dirty, which was a hard thing to do considering how little dirt is left uncovered by pavement. It was said that he was a disillusioned nuclear physicist and a graduate and youngest son of one of the founders of the prestigious educational institution that gave the town its name. After a bit of contemplation, I asked Philip why it was he always spoke in lyrics. Musical truth is the only truth there is. I could not imagine life without the wisdom of sounds. Think about it. Strange Fruit speaks more volumes than all of those books you sell in there, and that is only one song. Words sound of power. And before he started sampling one of the many cuts of his repertoire, I offered him a smoke and accepted his offer to accompany him to the show at the midnight hour the following Monday. Rosalva joined us after sweeping, wiping, and setting every chair in the cafe with its legs pointing towards God, the way churches are built, with a series of tall and pointy structures simulating fingers that announce the heavens. She asked Philip if he was up to sharing some herb with her. I decided to part and get some rest before my morning shift surprised me, still waiting for the bus, which seldom went by. Life is one big road with lots of signs, so when you run into the rocks, don't you complicate your mind. Live from hate, mischief, and jealousy. Don't bury your thoughts, put your dream into reality, Philip sang. And I finished his line by adding, "Put your preaching to reality." We laughed, and I was on my way as the bus pulled in. Once home, and with Marley's song still playing in my head, I walked into a conversation my mother and father were having about the latest from the country of the South. Another mass grave had been found by human rights activists, unearthing yet more bodies of the disappeared. I immediately changed the record on the turntable inside my head. The group Los Prisioneros were harmonizing, "Latinoamérica es un pueblo al sur de Estados Unidos. Latinoamérica es un pueblo al sur de Estados Unidos." I went to bed late and left my father drinking his beer and cursing alone in the darkness of the kitchen. My mother had taken my 3 little sisters to bed and was getting some rest before she would have to greet the half-dozen children she took care of, arriving early the next morning. I got in bed with headphones on and listened to Michael Smith's album, "Me Can't Believe It," the only album the teacher by trade was able to record, since as soon as the record hit Jamaican streets, he was shot down by gunmen from the paramilitary forces working to keep the country's stuttering democracy alive. During the years I worked at the bookstore, I too became friends with all of the punk rockers that worked at the cafe, including Sweet Rosalba. One particular Sunday, we all decided to join the annual peace march that rallied against proliferations of nuclear weapons. We were all going to ride together in Harry's hearse, equipped with a high-power hydraulic system which elevated a small staircase on either side of the car, and most importantly, an elevator to load caskets in back. On our way there, we stopped to invite Philip, but he refused to accompany us, saying he did not believe in peace. While he puffed from a thick and long spliff, he said, "Peace is not only the absence of war, but the pursuit of justice." As he said this, he let out a cloud of smoke rise onto his face. Everyone inside the mortuary car started to laugh and yell, "Oh yeah, hippies wanted peace, punk rock say. Justice first, then peace." Philip kept his cool, and with his eyes lost in the distance, he spoke, recalling Marley's words, but without singing this time. "If them are going to win the revolution, they must win it with Rasta. You can't win no other way, because if you win other way, you will go fight again. When you Rasta win, there will be no more war." The march started at 10, and everyone began to assemble at Dolores Park in the Mission District by 9. We were there on time, some with eyes half open, but with 13 earrings in each ear, well in place, hair so spiked up it made the shining sun cry, and with enough hair yell it looked like a sculpture held together with crazy glue. There were hundreds of moms and their young ones there. Most greeted us with a smile, and some overexcited to offer us signs which none of us cared for. Instead, we raided the first liquor store, which opened early that morning as the march passed by. At that point, most of those around looked at us with disgust, while the orderly sang slogans of unity and peace to the world, holding their signs high. We joined the march holding the 3 brown bags concealing our cheap malt liquor brew. Inspired by the spirits we were sipping and sharing, we sang our own home brewing slogans. And as we walked, the creations of our chorus became louder and better than the best lines Rimbaud or any of those drunken opium fiends and major figures of literature could have ever imagined. Smash grapes, not third world countries. Draft beer, not men. We got so inspired, some came in Spanish. Usa nos usa y nos abusa. We had also managed to get a hold of a few of the signs we had been previously offered, and with spray cans in hand, we changed them to read, "Alcoholics for Peace." A but not A, meaning alcoholics but not anonymous. As we continued marching, our slogans of the day got louder and louder, and as the spirits we shared took effect, warming our hearts and minds, spit started to come out of our vocal cords, and as the thick veins in our necks became filled and ready to explode with blood, co-marchers began to completely avoid us, now moving aside and looking towards us in total disgust. We went on feeling like the louder supporting vocal groups the Clash never had. But it was past lunchtime, and we were also hungry and decided to cut out in search of an affordable and filling aperitif to accompany the alcoholic ammunition we had just acquired. At this point, the march boosted over 10,000 strong through the empty downtown areas. We all left feeling extremely proud of ourselves as we were responsible for expanding those marching for peace in the world and against nuclear weapons to include several drunks, homeless, prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, and addicts. They decided to join in as we shared with them a sip of another world was possible, with our groundbreaking slogans and signs. Yet again, I showed up late for my night shift at the bookstore, and Prince Kali, Philip's radio name, came in and hung out until it was time to go. That night and until the morning's first race, he played songs relating to AIDS and HIV/AIDS. He layered the entire 6-hour program, which he titled 7,000 Watts of Dub Power, with obscure dub alongside every all-new sound record he owned. Before we went home that Tuesday morning, he closed the show with Wake Up and Live, mixed with reality poem by Linton Kwesi Johnson, the man who coined the term dub poetry, as the Prince explained over the airwaves. And remember, as I shared, as I learned in a reggae rhythm, wake up and live for the sake of younger generations. It is not the oppressor that can liberate the oppressed. It is the oppressed that can give back the humanity the oppressor has lost in the process of oppression. Sun is shining, and there's work to be done and much to be learned. Give thanks. Jah Rastafari. On our way home, Philip smiled and pulled out a smoke, and as he lit it, he told me his older brother was dying of AIDS, and that he had asked Philip to spend the last days of his life with him and their aging mother. The brother lived in New York, and since he was a stockbroker on Wall Street, he had robbed enough money, Philip explained, to have them both move there. Imagine that, he said. Wall Street was originally the place where slaves were bought and sold, a slave market, and now it is Babylon's major cathedral. Build your penitentiaries, we build your school, brainwash education to make us the fools. Is this your reward for our love? Telling us of your God above, we're gonna chase them crazy bald heads out of town. As he stopped the lick, he looked at me and told me that tonight had been his last show at the People's Radio. In front of his house, after some searching, he pulled out a record and gave it to me. We hugged, and before parting, I unhooked the miniature clay ocarina I wore around my neck and put it around his. Mapuches in the country of the South, when offering a gift, give what is most precious to them. Philip smiled softly with both his eyes and mouth and went home, speaking in lyrics and blowing on the Andean instrument around his neck. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So I guess it's time for poetry. Let's see here. Okay. Rock. I can't lie on my back, bruised orchid, and my arms hold the open marks of my offering in the dark. With the hum of the air conditioner, you ask me to ride you, and you groan, and I am numb. In awe of the last 4 days and the last 4 centuries, in awe of so many feet and so many drums, in awe of all my relations, and the scent in the air, earth, water, and fire on my flesh, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and cottonwood. Skin slick with aloe to cool the heat permeating everything I touch and my eye touches. I am still in that other place with my heart linked to the tree of life, but you want me on you, and I rock us both. Open-mouthed and moaning, I feel you, wanting to pull me out of the arbor, yank me from the place from the pupil of God and dreams, to have my body give us water. But my heart is heavy and distant like a boulder, dropped in a well so deep somewhere inside me, I can no longer hear me falling. Thank you. Memories of civil war in Southern California. On the screen, a house on fire and 4 men with white tees, kneeling before a cop, 4 o'clock movie on cable, But what I witness, a village ablaze with 4 men in peasant white cotton on their knees, with a soldier shoving his gun to a man's head who asks the earth for justice. My mind floods. I heave tears with torture of my people, doused with the knowing of wars I've never experienced, a memory from the isthmus, when in the years of war I thrived in California, yet here these memories expose themselves on the surface. How can I explain what my eyes translate? 17 years after the peace signatures and handshakes. Being here while bombs drop there supposed to protect me, yet in the 80s and 90s I dreamt war. Decapitated bodies and machine guns, huddled children unable to hide in empty rooms hollowed by gunfire. At a time in my waking life when I'd switch the channel on the news, grab the coupons first from the Sunday paper, ignorant of being Salvadoran beyond pupusas, atol, yuca, y pan con chumpe, but now consumed by a sliver of land. Our thin mother houses our people, a paradox as our parents who try to shovel soil on their wounds, toss memories over the precipice, their children dream war, capture testimonies that won't leave, like a twin sibling that died while we wailed. Pura rebeldía mía, solo día, sin luna, sin balanza, sola es ser rebelde, sin orden, del diseño familiar, cuesta aprender tan tarde en la vida, no hay nada, desafío, ser hombre, ser mujer, ser de paz. Pero lo que vi, golpes, gritos, soledad, mejor estar sola que con hombre fue la mala enseñanza. Ahora busco lo más sagrado, lo que me dio la montaña, el entendimiento, la unión del hogar, lo más sagrado, lo que se vive día a día, lo que se toca día a día, lo que se cuida día a día. La luna dentro de mí, sin sol no puede existir. Estoy entendiendo la razón. Sigo a nada en el río, viviendo en puro llanto y carcajada. En el exilio, estar sin familia, estar en caos. Hay entendimiento en todo, poder en todo, pero ¿qué aprender y qué poder? ¿De cuál esencia? ¿Fruto de qué? Poems. They seem to write us instead of us writing them. A pouch held the click-clack told through a blue bag, a collection earned of days crouched with one knee. On the dust trailed red dirt with delay, he'd pick each one. Like a diamond-held sphere between the sun, watch the glint. Through clear glass like the crescent of a child's nail, curved around a world suspended within a world, the game of chivolas requires precision, an alignment of connecting points and possible paths within a circle mapped on the earth. Pearls of sweat would trickle, bead into the other, down the side of his bright brown face. After much concentration, the frown would break into a smirk that said he will not lose, as he rolled the perfect marble, his favorite heated in his hand, like the summer of a girl's kiss, a smack on his open palm, a hot pebble emblazoning his lifeline. We all gathered, marbled close to the soil to see Mando's victory, the prophetic amber cat's eye cast, propelled with the determination of a thumb. That's it. Thank you. I don't know. Poems are so short. Like stories. A million hoofs gallop with the falling rain, hay knees blast along with the heater. Today my voice fills the car joyful with the drumming, rebounding on a little piece of California, an open water drum from clouds of the most worn leather. Hands twist the sky like a hide, ringing a collective voice to offer a drink of water on this round road. Hey ya, God bless you, bless us with this eternal life of a people at every moment in every epoch. Wet cloth clings against flesh in every continent. Wells overflow each century, as open mouths welcome a string of drops in every tongue. With promise, the gift will always be given. In every song, like every puddle that has known a child swishing legs and the splash of laughter from our reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina.
How many minutes?
Like 4 pages.
Okay. I'd like to read the first chapter of the book La Naya. La Naya is the name given to a woman whose name is Bernarda. Le ponen La Naya. Si se llama Teresita le dicen Chita, si se llama Roberto le dicen Beto. En fin, La Naya era Bernarda. Y al principio de la historia soy un médico que regresa al pueblecito donde él vivió cuando tenía 12, 13 años, en donde la familia de los poderosos del pueblo abusaron de su hermana, la violaron y la ahogaron cuando descubrieron que estaba embarazada. Eso sucedió en los años 40. En esta historia yo soy el hermano de la muertecita que viene a vengar al que mató a su hermana. Voy manejando hacia ese pueblo. Hace un calor con cojones. Así lo decíamos entonces y así lo decimos ahora que han pasado 40 años y el gris en los cabellos nos recuerda el paso inexorable de la vida. Compruebo por centésima vez lo inaguantable del calor mientras la camioneta recorre la carretera empolvada y el sudor en la frente se mezcla con el polvo del camino, dejando riachuelitos negros a lo largo de la cara. En la costa sur de Guatemala, con su calor inaguantable durante el día y por la noche un viento fresco que viene a acariciar nuestra frente y nos besa con la ternura de una madre. La costa sur, cargada de plantaciones de café y cañas de azúcar, ejidos donde los agricultores explotan el suelo y el ganado pasta pacientemente buscando la protección de un techo contra los rayos del sol candente. Mis compañeros de viaje soportan estoicamente aquel calor que los ha venido hostigando desde que el sol se colocó en la posición suprema. No nos conocemos. En realidad, hace apenas 10 minutos que abordé este autobús, después del desperfecto que sufrió mi propio vehículo cuando bajaba una cuesta para desembocar en el pueblo que se me había revelado en una vuelta del camino. Atrás se ha quedado mi auto, recomendado en un taller mecánico de Fraijanes, la ciudad. Todo ocurrió tan repentinamente que no tuve tiempo ni para atemorizarme. Venía yo muy tranquilo conduciendo con rumbo a San Luis cuando escuché algo que se quebraba debajo de mi asiento. Quiso mi buena suerte que pasara en esos momentos frente a un taller de reparaciones mecánicas. Solamente giré el volante y dejé que el auto siguiera moviéndose y que por inercia viniera a depositar sus miserias frente al empleado que me observaba con ojos sabios. Es el cigüeñal, me dijo, con la fluidez del que desborda sabiduría automotriz como parte de su lenguaje familiar. Así lo pensé yo, mentí descaradamente, pero no estaba seguro. Va muy lejos, a San Luis. Vaya, que por lo menos no queda lejos, pero si quiere que le componga el carro, le aviso que me voy a tardar unos días en lo que mando a traer las partes a la capital. Le indiqué que no importaba con tal de que hubiera manera de llegar a San Luis ese mismo día. No tarde en pasar la camioneta de don Virgilio Marín, y no se preocupe, porque eso sí, la flecha de oro nunca falla. Primero deja de tronar y llover que don Virgilio atrasarse en su ruta. Déjeme su nombre y dirección para llamarlo cuando esté listo el auto. Vivo en la capital, expliqué con la pena del que confiesa algún pecado vergonzoso. No tengo dirección en San Luis, pero espero pasar de vuelta en unas 2 semanas. Ni qué hablar entonces, se lo tendremos listo en pocos días. Ahora voy aquí, le dije 2 semanas calculando que para entonces ya habría mandado a mejor vida a Miguel Montes y con mi venganza satisfecha con el crimen perfecto iría de vuelta para la capital. Ahora voy aquí, sentado entre una mujer que amamanta a su hijo mostrándome indiferentemente la esplendidez de su teta con pezón café oscuro y la ventanilla en cuyo reflejo he sorprendido mi rostro, observándome con ojos burlones como tratando de no reírse ante mi tentación de mirar y no mirar aquel seno escandalosamente bello. Miro hacia la ventanilla y vuelvo minutos después y sorprendo mi rostro en el reflejo observándome con ojos severos. Sos un puñetero descarado, dicen sus labios que no son los míos, y yo miro al suelo tratando de ocultar mi vergüenza. No sé cuándo comencé a descubrir una personalidad ajena a la mía, que se vale de mi rostro y se me refleja en los espejos. Creo que era todavía un estudiante, cuando una noche que me preparaba para algún examen universitario, comprobé que los movimientos de mi rostro no coincidían con los de la imagen que me observaba desde un espejo cercano. Aquello me tranquilizó, pero con el correr de los años he llegado a aceptar ese reflejo como se acepta a un compañero que nos critica, se ríe de nosotros y que en pocas palabras nos hace la vida imposible. Otras veces actúa como si fuera la voz de mi conciencia. Una vocecita me hace sentir mal cuando el resto de mi yo se siente bien. Esta es una de esas veces porque he descubierto la ansiedad en mis ojos y, como tratando de fingir indiferencia, me he dado un banquete observando un seno que después de este día creo que no volveré a ver ya nunca más. Virgilio, el conductor del vehículo, mira por el retrovisor al grupo de pasajeros. Baja su mano derecha hasta la palanca y cambia de la velocidad. Y piensa, unos irán seguramente a la feria de oratorio, como se podía ver en las mujeres vestidas con sus ropas de bengalas, sus listones en el cabello y con esos ojos que anticipaban las zarabandas de los bailes pueblerinos, o en los hombres que se movían ligeramente incómodos dentro de las impedimentas de sus trajes nuevos. Si usted quiere, don Virgilio, se puede pasar la noche en oratorio. Trajeron una marimba de la capital y el salón Zarco va a estar que arde. Virgilio sonrió con la muchacha que le había hablado en tono. No es que no me guste su invitación, doñita, pero es que tengo este trabajo por delante y no puedo desatenerlo. Que si no fuera por eso, ¡ajá! ¡Malaya! Habían también pasajeros que se quedarían en Cuilapa, porque era día de mercado y vendrían los comerciales de Taxisco con sus quesos, los de Chiquimulía con sus redadas de jaibes y mojarras, o de lugares más lejanos como Jalpatagua, El Chaparrón, Amatitlán o Moyuta. Virgilio trató de concentrarse en las vueltas del camino, pero entonces pensó en su mujer. Llevaba ya 10 años de casado con la Nela Palacios y no tenía intenciones de echar a perder lo bueno que tenía aceptando la invitación interesada de alguna de estas pispiretas. Además, el negocio de la camioneta mejoraba cada día y no quería quedar mal con su socio. ¿Ya se va?